All right, so these books that I'm going to show you relate to chapter 10 of our textbook. And that one's a really difficult chapter to read, and it's an especially difficult chapter to address with children. So one of the best ways to talk to kids about some of these hard topics is through literature. The first book I want to share is for 6 months and up. It's a little teeny tiny book, and it's called Some Parts Are Not for Sharing. And they use fish so that it's, the point can be made without using humans necessarily, but it's just a very simple way of opening up a way to discuss with kids about what's appropriate and what's not. So everyone has a body, even fish have bodies. Some parts of our bodies we share with others. For example, our hands when we high-five someone or shake their hand. We share all of the parts of our bodies except the private areas. The private areas are any area a swimsuit covers. And young children really understand that. Any part a swimsuit covers. They are called private areas because some parts of our bodies are not for sharing. If someone asks to touch or touches the private areas, say no and run and find a trusted adult. You could talk about what a trusted adult is. There are some parts of our bodies we share with others, but some parts are not for sharing. The end. So very, very simple. Another one that reinforces the swimsuit is for maybe a little bit older. This one could be for very young kids, but this one could be for 3, 4, 5, 6 and up. But your body belongs to you, and kind of talks about when you go to the doctor, more of what's appropriate and more of what isn't in simple, reassuring language. And then verbal abuse. The Words Hurt, written by Chris Loftus. This is a really good one to talk to kids. Some kids, you just kind of get the feeling, or you even see their parents or caregivers speaking inappropriately to them. And this one opens up the door to talk about verbal abuse, or often you see them acting certain ways towards their peers, and then it's kind of a red flag for you that someone isn't talking to them appropriately. So that's a good one. A family that fights is another good one. A terrible thing that happened. This is a story for children who have witnessed violence or trauma. It's for ages 4 to 8. Talks about emotions and how to move on. And then Something Happened and I'm Scared to Tell. Encourages an abused child to talk to someone safe about what happened. Explains to the child that he or she is not to blame. Provides anatomically correct names for body parts, and talks about reasons why an adult might abuse a child. So this one you probably wouldn't whip out for the general classroom use, but if you know a student has suffered from a form of abuse and you want to talk to them more deeply about it, you can. Now, take note that any of these are great resources, but if you are going to be referring a child to CPS, you don't want to be reading these and then talking to the child and then filling out a report, because it's highly likely that the CPS caseworker will say, well, are you sure that they didn't get these ideas because you read this book to them that talked about verbal abuse or whatever? Because a lot of times young children mirror what they've heard in the story, and they don't always understand the difference between, oh, that was a story we read and this is your real life. Sometimes that gets gray. So if you're noting marks or signs of neglect or whatever, you kind of want to steer clear of this type of thing until after that report has been submitted. And you don't want to ask, there's all kinds of rules about, how to submit those forms, and that you're not asking probing questions, and that you're very careful about how you ask certain things and how you document certain things. And that's why it's really important that someone in your center is kind of the person that submits those, because they'll be really well trained in making sure that you get accurate information. So there's a few, but there are a ton more out there. for opening up the door to talk to kids about these tough issues. It's really not super beneficial to sit down and cold turkey be like, so, has your mom ever hit you? You know, that's not really appropriate, but things like this might help you at least get to know your students a little better and what they experience when they're not in your classroom, and then from there they can come talk to you one-on-one or in a smaller group basis about how they're feeling and how they can move on from those experiences. Then we always have those things in the news that are traumatic, that affect us all. Like when 9/11 happened, I was working on a military base, and so a lot of those families were really, really affected. I was in Korea at the time, so we weren't in the States, but still they're serving the United States of America, and America's being attacked, and so, or perceived to be being attacked by a specific group, and we had to have training about how to talk to kids about what's going on and how it's okay to feel scared about it or sad about it. You know, they didn't know if their parents were going to be deployed or how things were going to wash out. They just knew that something really bad had happened. So things like that come up all the time. Kids may be affected by different things, or something might happen in a child's family, a death in the family, a tornado where the kid's grandparents live, you know, all kinds of stuff. So be prepared to talk to kids about those types of things, and that's why the line of communication with parents is so important, because sometimes a kid comes in and just doesn't seem like themselves, and you have to dig a little deeper, and hopefully the parents are going to tell you, well, this happened, then you know, and you know how you can help the kid. But if they don't tell you, sometimes you have to find out on your own and provide that extra support. And that being said, sometimes when kids are stressed out or scared or worried, they are going to act out in ways that they don't normally act out. So you'll notice some changes in the child, and then that'll be a red flag for you to even sit down with them and read one of these books to open the door just for the two of you to talk. It doesn't have to be a whole group thing every time. So, really difficult subject, like I said before, but it's one that's a reality in our world today, and one that you will encounter as an early childhood teacher or specialist. So be prepared to have some of those tough conversations with students and parents alike.